Youth Voice, a podcast giving young people a voice in politics right across the island of Ireland. Today we're joined by UUP MLA for Upper Bann, Doug Beattie. So thanks for coming on.
No dramas. You nearly introduced me as DUP there.
That could have been a problem. So I suppose we'll get straight into the first question.
Sure.
Over in Wales, they've brought in votes at 16 in local elections. So with many of the parties now, Sinn Féin, I believe the SDLP alliance, and I'm pretty sure the UUP is behind it. But do you think we'll see votes at 16 in Northern Ireland anytime soon?
I think we're moving that direction, Dermot. I think it might take a little bit of time. I mean, we know that Northern Ireland in politics is a little bit slow. We're slower to sort of pick up on ideas and progress them forward. And I think that's one of the failings of politics in Northern Ireland in many ways, that innovative ideas are not really grasped when they should do. So I think we will do, but because I think we need to realign society. I mean, it's okay turning around and saying to a 16-year-old, you're not mature enough to vote, but then saying to that same 16-year-old, you are mature enough to get a job, and you are mature enough to pay taxes. You are mature enough to get married if you've got permission to do so, and mature enough to live alone. If we're able to say that to our younger people, then absolutely they should have the right to vote and to inform themselves. Because the reality is that younger people are the ones who are the future, and they're voting for the future. So I think it's important that their voice is heard. So I do think we will have it here in Northern Ireland. Do I think it's going to be soon? It's certainly not going to be in 2022 or 2023, but certainly I think if the momentum picks up, it's something we might see in the next 5 years.
That's I suppose that is one of the big things that we're kind of pushing for here at the Youth Voice, is the votes at 16. But one of the big, I suppose, arguments against it is that young people don't understand politics, that we're not taught enough about politics, that we don't have the education. So would you, I suppose, support an increase of political education in schools, not just as, I suppose, an A-level or a GCSE, not just as an optional subject, but as something that would be part of the earlier curriculum, not in primary school, but from, I'd say, maybe second or third year onwards, where young people would learn about how Stormont works, how voting works, how, I suppose, all of the systems work, what each party believes in, what unionism means, what nationalism means. And I suppose, without getting into it highly contentiously, do you think that would be something that, I suppose, you would support in future at some point?
I think there's a number of things to that. First of all, I'd say this, Dermot, is I know some 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds who don't understand politics. This is not just the domain of younger people. Younger people maybe don't know as much because of age and experience, but I also know some younger people who know far more about politics and are more politically minded than people who are in their 30s and 40s. But there is a body of work to be done. And that body of work, I would say, is about how politics affects our everyday lives. Every single thing that we do in life has got a political element to it, whether we like it or not. And I think people need to understand that. I think here in Northern Ireland, we need to understand how politics works, how the structures of politics works, and those levers and mechanisms of politics work, and help people, I suppose, and how wider politics works, whether that's here in the United Kingdom through the devolved system from Westminster out, or whether that be what happens down in the Irish Republic, or indeed how Ireland now will interact with the European Union, because we clearly won't here in the UK, but in Ireland they will still be interacting with the European Union. And I think people in school needs to understand how that European Union Parliament works as well. So yes, I agree with you. I think that there needs to be something to educate people in regards to that. Do I think it's up to an educational system to tell people what unionism is and what nationalism is? I don't think so. I think that's what political parties are supposed to do. They're supposed to promote themselves and their message, and it's up to them to reach out, be that in a manifesto, be that talking to the likes of yourself here, Dermot, I think that's up to us to do it. The wider understanding of what it means here in Northern Ireland, I guess, is part of the political makeup. But there's more than just unionism and nationalism in this world. There's far more things out there that people will be interested in, as opposed to what is, in effect, a binary constitutional question, which shapes a bit of our politics here. I think there's far more that's important to people out there, be that education, be that housing, be that the economy, be that the environment. So I think it's up to us to promote ourselves as a political party or as political leaders, but certainly the mechanisms of how politics works, I think, does need to be raised, and I think it needs to be raised at quite an early level. I think it needs to be in our educational curriculum at quite an early level, so that people can understand it better. When we do get to the stage that 16-year-olds are taking themselves to vote, because it's an incredibly fulfilling thing to do, to have a vote and a decision and a choice to make as to who will represent you, whether your vote is a successful vote or whether it's not successful. It's still quite empowering.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting. That's an interesting view on it, I suppose, as well. Moving on, I suppose, staying on the topic of education, with the exam, I suppose, fiasco that we're facing at the moment, where I suppose students are facing serious uncertainty. We don't really know what the situation was. If you, I suppose, on behalf of the UUP, if you could say anything to the young people of Northern Ireland who are uncertain, and if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be, just in terms of our exams and our situation, I suppose?
Yeah, and this is unprecedented times, I have to say. I mean, nobody will have known the likes of this ever before, where exams are cancelled, and young people like yourself and people who are looking to improve themselves academically and go into further education feel that their opportunities are being stunted. What I would say to everybody is this: that you can be whatever you want to be if you have the drive within you to be that person. I left school at 16. I have got no educational qualifications at all. I didn't do any A levels. I didn't do any GCSEs. I didn't go to university. If you look at my educational achievement card, you will see a blank page. I don't say that because I'm proud of that, but I'm saying that it's because that's where life took me. But it didn't stunt me in trying to achieve all I could achieve of myself in the future. And I had a long career before I got into politics. I've managed to write and publish 3 books. I've managed to get myself into politics as a councillor and then elected as an MLA. And I'm a justice spokesperson now. So I was able to, without that educational background, be able to drive forward and be all that I could be in life, and that's done through hard work and understanding and failure and learning by failure. That said, that's just me. There are people out there who will feel that their chances of progressing through life is hampered because of this fiasco, and it has been a fiasco. And all I would say to them is to dig deep, really look to see what you can achieve in the future. I mean, the opportunities may open again. I do think we have failed at a political level, certainly with the AQE and the 11 plus fiasco that we had. But even the fact is that at such a late stage, we had to cancel all other exams, the GCSEs and the A levels, and I think that's really has left a deep hole for young people coming up and wanting to prove themselves academically. What we have to do now is make sure that we haven't closed off that channel of opportunity for them, and people need to work hard on that. Be that our Minister of the Economy or be that our Education Minister. They need to work hard to make sure that there is an educational pathway for anybody who wants to take it to be able to progress in the direction they want to in the future.
I suppose it's quite inspiring. I suppose there. Moving on from that, onto the topic of mandatory coalition.
Yeah.
The Alliance Party have voiced their support to end, I suppose, this mandatory coalition and move to, I suppose, more normalised politics and away from the sectarianism of, I suppose, power sharing. The DUP have also always supported this, and there are increasing calls for us to normalise our politics. What is the UUP position on mandatory coalition?
Well, it's interesting. And it can be quite a protracted answer to this, because if we look back to the reasons why we have mandatory coalition, it was to take us out of what was a really horrible situation we were in 1998, where we had awful violence on our streets, and people were being killed, murdered on a day-to-day basis, and people were having their lives affected. So we come up with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement to end that. And it was through that we ended up with this mandatory coalition to be able to do that. So therefore, that was a good thing. And nobody should see it other than something that is but a good thing. But like everything, it's only ever a starting point to get us away from the violence of the past and get us going in a path, a peaceful path, where we can work together. And really, there should have been in my mind, a Belfast Agreement, Good Friday Agreement 2, and a Belfast Agreement, Good Friday Agreement 3. And this is where you look at where you've come from, where you've got to, and how you're going to change things. And one of the big things is by making sure that we have a properly funded and resourced opposition. Because an opposition isn't just about having a political party sitting in the assembly trying to poke holes on the government. It's about scrutiny and good governance, and a good opposition creates good governance. And before, at the start of last year, when the new decade, new approach came in, and we all went into mandatory coalition within the Ulster Unionist Party, I wanted to go into opposition, and I wanted to go into opposition because I thought that was good for governance. And that's that normalisation that you talk about, Dermot, is having that opposition party to good governance. So I think that's the way we need to go in the future. I think we need to have a voluntary coalition, and those people who are not in that should go into opposition to be able to hold them to account. I think that's what my party aspires to in the future, but we also know the realism of where we are today. And unless we make sure that our government is working well and working well for the people, and it's less fractious in the way it does business, we need to get that fixed first, and then we need to move into this voluntary coalition and making sure we have a resourced and funded opposition to be able to hold government to account. To me, that's normalising politics in Northern Ireland, in the same way as they have it in the Irish Republic, in the same way they have it in the rest of the United Kingdom, and pretty much anywhere else in the world. What we have now is a hybrid which just hasn't been changed in the last 20 years, and it probably should have been.
Yeah, that's definitely, I suppose, myself, I don't know whether a lot of people would agree with me. I would be quite for getting rid of mandatory coalition, not in a Bolshevik kind of revolutionary sense. I think it does have to be something that's transitioned. I don't think we can just kind of hold all the MLAs at gunpoint and say, right, you're getting a voluntary coalition now. But
and I think
one of the big problems.
If I can, just on that, Dermot, and I think that's the big issue, is that unless we have trust in politics in Northern Ireland, and we have to have trust, and I don't think the trust is there just yet. I don't think the trust is there between political parties. So unless we fix that first, then we're not going to be able to move forward. So you're absolutely right. It needs to happen, but it has to be transitional, and we have to deal with the problems. And trust is one of those huge problems which we haven't been able to overcome over this last 20 years.
I suppose actually building on that question of trust, that you basically read my mind. That was what I was going on to. But one of the, I suppose, a big thing with young people, and we have in the 18 to 24 bracket such a really low turnout, often falling under 20% or under 50%. Sorry, but One thing that I suppose a lot of young people have said, and I've spoken to people about, is this idea that your vote doesn't matter anymore. In a mandatory coalition, you go in, you vote for, I suppose, one of five or six parties, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be the DUP, Sinn Féin in the top two, and then the SDLP and the UUP taking the rest of the portfolios, and then Alliance taking Justice. What would you say to the young people who feel almost disenfranchised by our system, who feel like their vote doesn't count anymore, and that they don't really want to engage in democracy anymore because it just doesn't represent them anymore?
You raise a fantastic point there, Dermot, and to add to that as well, the problem that we have here in Northern Ireland is people aren't voting for policies. They're voting to exclude somebody. So people are voting, as an example. This is just an example. So people are voting for the DUP not because they believe in the DUP policies, because they want to keep Sinn Féin out. People are voting for Sinn Féin not because they believe in Sinn Féin policies, but because they want to keep the DUP out. So we're voting in many cases not about the manifesto pledges and the policies that parties bring forward. We're just voting to keep the other person out. Now, of course, there's people who aren't. There's people who are voting for parties because they absolutely believe in what they're doing. But that's a huge problem that we have here in Northern Ireland. But we can affect change. Remember, of course, that the Ulster Unionist Party and the SDLP used to be the two largest parties. And people voted us out of being the two largest parties. And now you have the DUP and Sinn Féin. People can do the same again. They can vote them out and put others in if they think they are better. You know, people have the opportunity to vote for a full range of things. And even if they don't get the person they want elected, they're still democratically putting their vote forward, which is incredibly important. I'll give you a story, and this is true, Dermot. So I was in Afghanistan. I've been in Afghanistan a number of times, but I was in Afghanistan when women were allowed to vote in elections for the first time, and they turned up. They walked for miles to give their vote, and the way they gave their vote was by dipping their finger in green ink and giving a fingerprint. Was how they voted. And when they went outside, the Taliban met them with secateurs, which are pruning shears, and cut off their inked finger because they voted. But those women still turned up and voted, knowing full rightly that their vote may not elect who they wanted to elect, but because it was important to show their democratic right, these women did that. It was an incredible demonstration of moral courage to do what was the right thing. Now, we don't have that here in Northern Ireland, but I would say to young people is this, as you can affect change. You can affect change by doing a number of things. First of all, looking at the political party and looking at their policies, and make your decision based on a policy. Don't make your decision based on a color. Don't make your decision based on a religion. Don't make your policy based on how somebody dresses, or what they do with themselves when they're not at work. Just base it on what their policies are, and you can affect change, and you can affect a difference here in Northern Ireland. It may not happen initially, but it will happen over time. Change can be affected if people have the moral courage to turn up, queue up, and cast their vote, which is their democratic right to do so. And that's what I would say to all people. And I absolutely get your point that people are disenfranchised because of our system. Our system needs to change, but our system will only change when people turn up to vote for people who are willing to change it. And those people who are willing to reach out to people, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their social background is, no matter what their educational attainment is, or their religion, or culture, or identity, or where they've come from, or where they're going to in life. So I would just say that to everybody, and particularly our younger generation, the 16s plus. You can really change how Northern Ireland goes about business. And remember this as well, Dermot, is once politicians realize that young people will vote, they will start doing things to influence young people. And therefore, young people will have their voices heard, by just being that demographic that votes.
suppose, yeah, I think it's a really interesting point there. Moving on from that, and I suppose we'll end on this one. And I suppose the one sentence that could ruin any dinner party. Let's talk about Brexit. But with the UK leaving the EU, with Northern Ireland's fate being, I suppose, confusing with the Northern Ireland Protocol and the DUP's calls for I think it's Article 16.
Yeah.
What do you see the future for Northern Ireland outside of the EU? Like, what do you think we should be doing now in terms of maximising our economic and our cultural, I suppose, prosperity and opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say this first of all, for background, Dermot, is I voted to remain. I'm a unionist. It's clear that I'm a unionist. I believe in the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I think it's best for us politically, financially, and culturally. That's what I believe in. But I accept there's others who believe the absolute opposite to me. But I voted to remain within the European Union. For all of its problems, it safeguarded who we were, it safeguarded our identity, and it safeguarded our union. So I voted in favour of it. But whether we like it or not, the democratic vote said we leave, and therefore we've left. So we're out. The Northern Ireland Protocol is hated, and I hate the Northern Ireland Protocol as much as anybody else. It's put a border down the Irish Sea separating the United Kingdom, and that's not right. And the DUP have their DNA all over that. They give tacit approval and then tried to withdraw it a number of weeks later. So they are at fault. But again, there's no point us all standing in a circle pointing our fingers at each other, because it's not going to help us. What we have to do is find practical ways to get round the protocol. It's there, it's going to be there. But we must make sure that our young people, our working class people, our older people do not suffer because of this. So we have to get workarounds. And we can't be too precious about this. We just need to look at practical systems and try and see if we can get them fixed. And that's done by dialogue between ourselves and the rest of the United Kingdom, ourselves and our nearest neighbour, which is the Republic of Ireland, ourselves and the European Union, to try and fix all of these problems. Everybody needs to be in problem-fixing mode, and there's no point just complaining about it. And Article 16, when you read it, which says if there's going to be a real economic disaster, then you can invoke that, which basically sets aside some of the protocol issues, and you could do that, and our party called for it for a 12-month period so we can get things in place and fix some of the issues, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So there's no point me just standing here or sitting here as elected representative and pointing my finger and saying, well, this is all your fault, fella. What I have to do is work around it. I have to make Northern Ireland work. I love this country. I love this part of the United Kingdom. I love all of the people within it. So what I have to do is make Northern Ireland work. If I make Northern Ireland work, then it provides for our people. It provides for our young people. It provides for our vulnerable people. It provides for our older people. It creates prosperity. It creates jobs, and it creates a society that is comfortable with each other. And that's my job. I have to do that. So I'm certainly not in the game of standing in a circle, pointing my finger and saying to people, "Own it. It was your fault." We know whose fault it is. We know where it came from, but we are where we are. So to me now, sitting here talking to you in the middle of a pandemic, having just done Brexit, going through the throes of the protocol, all I'm saying is we all have to dig in and make this work. And I'm on problem-solving mode. I'm not in blame mode. It doesn't help us at all.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we have to accept we've left, and whether we like it or not, whether you're a Remainer, whether you're a Brexiteer, we're gone. And I think that is something that we've just been caught up in, whether it's, well, we voted to remain, so we're not going to do anything. I think from, I suppose, a lot of the parties, and then there is also from the DUP who have said, oh, well, we're gone. We wanted out, but we didn't want this Brexit. We wanted our Brexit, but we rubber stamped this Brexit. And I suppose it's causing a lot of confusion for people. It's so do you support Article 16? But what does Article 16 mean? And what's the Northern Ireland Protocol? And are we in? Are we out? Or where's the border? Is it a physical one? And I suppose if you could give people advice on how to, I suppose, understand it and what we need to do, like what do you think people as a whole, not just our elected representatives, what do you think we need to, I suppose, do and understand in regards to Brexit and where we are now?
Yeah,
Like, is there much we can do?
here's an easy way to think about this in many ways, Dermot. I mean, you're down in Newton Hamilton, yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah,
down near the border with the Irish Republic. That border is virtually invisible. It's invisible. I mean, we don't hardly even talk about it anymore. Of course, it's there. It is there because when you cross from one to the other, the money changes and certain laws and rules change. But it's virtually invisible. And because it's now invisible, people are at ease with it. That's not to say that they haven't lost their aspiration for a single united Ireland. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is people are at ease with it because it's virtually invisible. The border down the Irish Sea, we need to fix the problems with that to make it invisible. And when we make it invisible as well, then people will realize that life can go on and we can make Northern Ireland work because this so-called border in the Irish Sea, which is really annoying, particularly unionists and myself included, but if we can just make it invisible, and if people are out there wondering, well, what's going to happen? Well, nothing's going to happen. Trade will change its axis. If they were importing sausage rolls from Manchester and they can't get them across, they'll import sausage rolls from Dublin. They'll get this produce from somewhere else. It will come in. Some people will like that because they'll think there's an economic United Ireland. I don't see it like that. I just see that this is sale and demand. People want something, you get it, and whether you get it from a Great Britain market or whether you get it from a European market or whether you get it from the Irish Republic, whether you get it from the United States, it doesn't really matter. So I think in the next month or 2 months, there's going to be an easing of the frictions in the Irish Sea border. That doesn't mean I like the protocol. I don't like the protocol. If I can get rid of it, I will get rid of the protocol. But I go back to the point that I make, is I have to make Northern Ireland work. And if I don't make Northern Ireland work, then people will say, well, what's the point in being in Northern Ireland? What's the point in Northern Ireland being in the United Kingdom if you can't make it work? So I have to make Northern Ireland work. And the way that the Irish border has become virtually invisible, but it's there. We need to make this Irish Sea border virtually invisible as well, but understanding for trade reasons and for protocol reasons, it's actually still there.
Yeah, I think, and we're coming up just on, to finish on time there. If you can address, I suppose, the young people of Northern Ireland in terms of everything we've said, just a quick, I suppose, bit of advice in terms of dealing with the pandemic, and what's your advice in terms of actually handling the lockdown and, I suppose, getting through it?
Dermot, people are going through a historic event right now as we speak. This people and historians will be talking about this in years and years and years to come. We'll be referring back to this in 20, 30, 40 years time. When we're all dead and buried, people will be still talking about this period in our history. So we are all living through a global history event at this moment in time. People need to understand something, and young people need to understand something, is they are not invincible. They are as vulnerable as everybody else. They have a long life to live, an enjoyable life to live, and all of the things that they want to do now, they will be able to do in the future. So, everybody has to adhere to the guidelines, because right now, as we speak, there are people dying, scared, and alone. There are people struggling to catch a breath, and we can all influence that. We can all influence that by adhering to the rules of the pandemic and saying, I miss my friends, but I'm willing to accept that if I can make sure that not another single person dies or gets sick in Northern Ireland. And we will come out of this at the end of the day, and we will be looking back at this global event that they have lived through, and it is a global event, historic event that they've all lived through. But they just need to adhere to it. And my last advice to all of those who you reach out to, Dermot, is try to look and accept difference. There will be people looking at me on this and saying, I don't agree with him. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. But they just need to understand that I have a different opinion than they may have. So all of us need to understand and respect difference. And if we can do that, then we can improve not just politics in Northern Ireland, but our society in general. And I'm a great believer in trying to reach out through all of the difficult things that we have to go through to try and improve our society.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for coming on. We're going to leave it here. To everyone listening, thank you everyone for listening, and I hope to see you all next time.